Today we're sitting down with one of my old friends, Palantir employee number 12, Ari Gesher. He's working on a new deep tech startup called Kairos Aerospace that's fighting greenhouse gas emissions using imaging tech. Their tech, when fully applied, could reduce the total anthropogenic warming of the atmosphere by 12.5% of the way to keep us below that 1.5 Celsius barrier set forth by the IPCC needed to prevent catastrophic climate change. That is a big mission. We'll also talk about some of the key things that made Palantir the $45 billion startup it is today. Hiring. My friend Ari was the lead on campus recruiting for many, many years. He's a great software engineer, and in a lot of ways, he was a shaman of sorts, helping to hire some of the world's best software engineers into that company. Let's get it. All right, thanks a lot for coming on the channel today. It's so cool to reconnect with an old friend from our Palantir days. Off the bat, I'm really excited to hear about the new startup you're working on and the mission and what is Kairos Aerospace.
Kairos has been around for about 7 years. It was started by a couple of astrophysicists who were working at Lockheed Martin and were sort of used to building kind of space hardware and sensors and stuff. And they really decided to turn their attention to what they could do to build that kind of stuff outside of Lockheed without all the sort of process and bureaucracy that goes along with working at a big contractor, but still work on that kind of cool stuff. And then also how to use that kind of technology to really help the Earth. And they came across some research that was done that showed that a lot of the methane emissions from oil and gas fields where you're actually like drilling and extracting the stuff, that the vast majority of it appears to come from these very large leaks from sort of broken or misconfigured equipment, what's sort of called the super emitter theory. No one had a good way to detect this stuff and go and find where these leaks are because the infrastructure can be just so geographically sparse and wide. And so they set about to build this spectrometer that they're like, oh, we know how to do that. They did, classic Silicon Valley style. They went into Brian's garage for like 2 years and worked on this piece of hardware until they got it working. And once it was working, it was time to sort of build all the software and data processing stuff around that. And that's when I came on aboard. That's when I came aboard 5 years ago. Today, we've been doing continuous data taking operations for about 2.5 years, since mid-2018. We've basically had planes in the air every week going out and scanning oil fields in Texas, New Mexico, and a few other places. And we now have the biggest data set on methane emissions. Already, what we've worked with our customers, the leaks that we've found and they've gone and fixed has had a larger environmental impact than every Tesla that's been put on the road so far. And we're really just getting started. And so, yeah, when we look at the research behind the effect that methane has on global warming, just shutting down this source of methane emissions into the atmosphere should solve roughly 12% of the total anthropogenic warming that we need to stop to keep us below that 1.5 degrees Celsius barrier that the IPCC has laid out to avoid really catastrophic climate change. So it's hard to find, in the Archimedean sense of, give me a lever in the right fulcrum and I'll move the world. It's hard to find a better lever than this. I mean, we're only like a 25-person company. And so it's a really exciting and interesting place to be.
It really sounds like systems thinking is at play here. Global warming is one of the things that is really a fundamental problem and challenge for humanity. And then you look down and you know how to build software, you know how to build hardware, and you can use engineering to solve problems. And this is certainly one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And we even take that systems thinking one step further into the business model itself. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach this. You could like put up satellites or something and take a bunch of data and release it to the public. That would be very adversarial with the oil and gas industry. We believe that the right way to solve this problem is to work with the oil and gas industry. And so we actually designed a system that's very friendly to their operations. It's very friendly in terms of the data that it captures. So there is a detection floor that we have. And below that, those leaks Well, indoors can be like safety issues. Outdoors, they're not a huge climate issue. And we see only leaks above a certain size. So we're sort of effectively triaging the problem to only deal with the biggest issues first, the ones that are the least amount of effort and resources and money to fix. And then because we fly over the oil fields currently in airplanes, one day we might take it to space, but that's a whole other conversation. But for now, it's airplanes. There's a lot of like oil fields are very dangerous places. And so there's just a ton of like liability and insurance issues about ever setting foot on any of these facilities. And so because we fly over, it ends up being a very, very light touch on their operations. From a pure like user experience standpoint, we've made it so they send us a list of their assets, like the locations of where their stuff is. And what they get back is the list of the ones that are leaking. And so it's a really clean interface between the two companies and the operational arm of the oil field.
I guess in terms of reaching product market fit, you've reached that. And quite a lot of the people who are watching this, they might be focused on software. They might want to do a mission focused deep tech startup. What was the march to, what does product market fit look now for you? And then what was the march to get here? Like, how did you enable that? Because it looks very different than perhaps a software startup that you can just code in a basement and release and then repeat.
There's a lot of moving parts there. So first you have to like build the system and you have to get it to work, and it needs to be scientifically validated. So just developing the hardware is a very different endeavor than it would be to just sit down with a pile of APIs, glue it all together into a good product. So that was the first challenge, was just getting a sensor system that worked, and it took 2 revisions to get there. So at that point, you have a sensor that works. You're like, okay, now we can maybe kind of attack the problem. So the way that I think about the evolution of Kairos has to do with hitting various different plateaus of product market fit. And each one is one that you need to reach to sort of get to the next one. So the first one was just building a working sensor, which is in itself a pretty technical achievement, where you have to understand material science and quantum physics and the nature of light. We basically look at infrared rainbows and use that to measure the composition of the atmosphere. So that took 2 years and a couple different revisions of designs to get done. Once we had a working imager that could reliably spot methane at least once, the next thing to do was to really like operationalize it, see if we could take it out on an oil field rather than using the kind of controlled releases we did to test it, and go find a real leak. I think always when you look back on an era, it's a little bit of clown school where you're like, I can't believe we were doing this so poorly. We had big issues with the imager where there were places where light would come in and mess up the signal, and it took us a while to figure that out. Some of our early results, while they worked, they didn't work as well as they could have. And once we got past that, the performance got a lot better. And that took a bunch of sort of like test flights and going out and finding things. And so that next plateau was like, go out and take data for one day reliably and find something, right? And like that first day, like probably took us a week worth of prep. The next plateau was go out and take data every day, right? Get all your systems, your automation, all of that in enough shape that being under continuous operations was even possible. And in the early days, that was a very seat of the pants. And then we, as we sort of iterated our way through the challenges, we were able to build up all the automation we needed to make it very easy to operate, or relatively easy, I should say. At that point, we were ready to really go and find a customer. So before that, we could go do a pilot and prove to someone that it worked and get their interest, get their feedback, right? But at the point where we could go out and fly every day, now we could go scan a very large area, right? So a plane can do like 50 square miles in a day. The entire survey area for like a medium customer probably takes a week of good flying time, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how far flung the infrastructure is. And so that got us to the one customer plateau, right? Where we could go and like actually get the data for a customer in a reasonable amount of time. Today, we're servicing multiple customers in the same area simultaneously. Some days we have 4 or 5 different planes up in the air taking data simultaneously. And so there's been sort of scaling challenges along the way. And each one of those, takes a lot of work to get to. And then it just becomes the shoulder of the giant that you're standing on to get to the next one.
Yeah, the first part is making it work. The second part is how do you get, especially particularly large customers, basically to take a chance and use it and then see value. What was that process? It sounds like that's getting faster over time.
It is. And I think, part of it is what we saw was that the world was going to come to methane as a problem to be solved, even if they weren't there when we started. So it was sort of doing this sort of prediction of where the world would be. And we've seen that happen in the marketplace. The interest from our customers has gone up over time, and not just because of our capabilities, just their organic interest in this problem has gone up over time. Dealing with large oil companies is it's when you're a tiny startup is it's complicated. They have a way that they like to do things. They often have these master services agreements that aren't necessarily written for the way that you want your business to operate. We found the right people, and we figured out the sort of the right. We had some fits and starts with some early contracts that went okay, but like we were like, okay, here's what we can do better next time. Here's what we can do better next time. Our first real big customer was Pioneer Natural Resources, and they've been great. We've been working with them for a number of years now, and they are the ones who really took the chance on us and had us do a survey of their entire field. And then we've done a number of repeat surveys since then. And once we could reference them as a customer, it was a lot easier to get in the door in other places. When we were sort of cold calling, there was the really open question was, does this work? We have to get our science people in. We need to do a pilot. And pilots can be a great way to get a big contract, but they can also be a big distraction because sometimes they don't always lead in the right direction. One real important piece there, especially when dealing with enterprise customers, is making sure that you're actually talking to the right part of the company. Because if you're offering a free pilot, someone is always willing to say yes to that, but it doesn't mean that they actually have the right pull to actually get you the contract, to get you the next deal. And so, yeah, it's very different than in the consumer space where you just have this sort of pool of users that you can dip into, customers, and some of them you're going to run experiments on and see how it goes. The deals in enterprise they're big deals and they're spiky. So it hurts to lose one. Figuring out the right way to approach this and how to enter these companies is almost, you got to do the research. You got to figure out who you're talking to, how they're constituted. It's sort of the same across all companies, but a little different. So it sometimes takes a long time, up to a year to even get to the point where you've got the contract. The flip side of that is they're really sticky. If you can deliver what they need, they'll stick with you for a long time.
Yeah, I have to imagine it's a little bit like magic. When you come to some of these older industries with the capabilities that, modern technology can sort of deliver to them, I wonder what the reaction is sometimes. It's like, wow, I didn't know that that was possible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we see that both on the imaging side. I mean, definitely, like they didn't know that this capability, this sort of wide area capability existed because we invented it. And then also on the data and software side. I mean, I think coming from the background that you and I both come from, there's a certain nimbleness around these kinds of problems and understanding of how to rapidly put together solutions that can not just deliver but scale. And that is something that you don't necessarily see in these older industries. And so it's nice to be able to show up with something that does. I mean, magic might be a little far because these are very technically sophisticated organizations for the things that they do in terms of doing the extraction and the exploration. And often they have pretty sophisticated data arms. Our use of cloud technology and open source tools to rapidly put together solutions to this stuff is definitely like a differentiator. And it's great to be able to show up to them and say, yeah, whatever you need, we can deliver it, and we can deliver it fast. One of the interesting things about starting up this business is that it turns out that the United States, even though it's not necessarily the first place you'd think of in terms of oil production, does do a lot of oil production. And because of how free we are, literally, it's the right place to start this kind of business. So what we've been able to do is go and fly over oil fields with no restrictions and take that data and have that data. It's our data. We own it. We have all the rights to that data. In terms of, and the Permian, which is this part of Northwest Texas, Southeast New Mexico, is maybe the busiest oil field in the world. There's more drilling, more activity going on there than there is anywhere else. And so if you wanted a place to go scan, that's a great place to do it. And so we kind of lucked out in that. What that's done is we've had the ability to talk to multiple customers over time and figure out how they operate, see a bunch of different kinds of operations, but then have all that data be ours so that we can use it for all of our prototyping and development needs. As we expand globally, and this is sort of the next level of scale that we want to get to, one of the big elements of that is going into other countries where they do oil production. But in general, in lots of other places, rather than it being this sort of free market, free for all, like it is here for resource development, there are national oil companies. There are sort of like umbrella organizations. There are quasi governmental entities. Sometimes they contract out to oil majors to come and do the development. But what it means is that there's just sort of like one big contract to land. We get to show up with a fairly sophisticated operation, and we've dealt with a lot of variance in the marketplace to sit at the table for these kinds of deals. And those are, if we can get a whole country or half a country or whatever it is, that ends up being, we couldn't have done that without sort of doing it in the lab that is, Texas and New Mexico. So it ends up being sort of the right lab space to find that product market fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, to be able to have so many customers in one place all at one time, and then also really change the unit economics pretty fundamentally if you can go from one field to another and sign them all. In DoorDash, as in with Kairos, density is pretty key for these business models.
Yeah, that's correct. Density is key. And in fact, in places like the Permian, all of our margin is tied up in how much we can use time from a single airplane flight to service multiple customers, right? Because the plane's going to go up, it's going to fly. That day's worth of data taking has a fixed cost. And as we can bring in more customers to the same survey, our margins go up and our efficiency goes up in that regard. It's different in a place where there's just one producer, because then we know exactly what we need to fly and there's no notion of infill sales. But at the moment, like our strategy in the United States is to find an anchor customer in some part of the basin that's going to give us a big area to survey, and then find all the other producers in that area and see if they're also interested, right? So yeah, density is key.
It's a far cry from some of our Palantir days in some respects. I mean, but there are a lot of parallels. So for those of you watching, one of the cool things about Ari is that we were sort of very, very old friends from our Palantir days. So I was actually officially employee number 11. I think I get misquoted as number 10 sometimes. And then Ari was actually employee number 12 at Palantir. Just really cool to hang out with old friends. And that was Palantir was always an extremely mission oriented company.
Yeah, I mean that's what drew me in, and I think drew us all in the beginning was, as has been told in many other places, the problem that we were trying to solve out of the gate there was one around counterterrorism, and making intelligence agencies much more efficient in the way that they moved and analyzed data between them. In that sort of immediate post 9/11 era, this was one of the big problems that we needed to fix in society. And I think that brought together a nice group of like-minded individuals. And the thing that I was always struck by was how people having that passion for the problem that they're working on can amplify their effort, and amplify their ability to make good decisions collectively, because everybody's incentives are aligned in the same direction, right? The whole company's working on the same problem. The whole company's there for the same reason. It really makes for the what I would call, the sort of like the fantasy picture of a startup, of everybody in the room giving it their all to really nail the problem. Mission focus certainly helps get that alignment, and makes for, I think, a much better experience across the board.
Yeah, the thing that I really underestimated that now I realize is sort of the recurring pattern with startups that turn into really big startups is that one thing we had at Palantir was always sort of the ambition, but also the gall to say that we wanted it to be big. To say that we wanted to tackle that big a mission, and to also say that if we succeed at that mission, this is how big it was going to be. And the funniest story I remember is, when we were you and me and a bunch of the other early Palantir people were actually Stanford grads. You were UIUC, but I remember going to Sweet Hall at Stanford, and we basically brought giant stacks of pizzas, and somehow I got assigned the role of making the flyers for our recruiting event. And the slogan I put on there was "Join the next Google." And I remember, we were giving away pizza, but then engineers and people late at night working on their projects at Sweet Hall at Stanford, they would look at the pizza box, and then they would look at me, and then they would say, "Are you effing serious?" Because we were like a 12-person company, and like nobody had ever heard of us. We didn't even have like a cooler logo yet. I think we were still using like the 6 hexagons or whatever. So it was just funny. And it's just so strange today because I think I just looked at the Palantir stock price. I think it's sitting at $38, $39 today. I mean, who knows where it'll be when people actually watch this, but it's pretty clearly a company that is worth tens of billions of dollars. There's some argument as to what exactly, which echelon of that it's in, but we weren't far off. And I actually do think that there's still so much upside in that company and like the overall mission that it may well still give Google a run for the money. But it goes to show like you could even be an order of magnitude off, but you'll still land among like the world's largest startups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was interesting, Alex Karp, the CEO's thesis, in the early days was that Palantir in general, not just specifically on the intelligence mission, but existed to really help the critical institutions that make up our society, like do their best work. And I think, privately, we had the experience of going to these institutions and being surprised at how bad they were at things and how much help they needed from Palantir with the shock of the pandemic and other things going on. That notion has kind of exploded into the public consciousness, and the things that Palantir can bring to the table today are sorely needed as the world changes and the institutions need to change with it, and they need to do things that are really sort of deeply data backed. Palantir is the infrastructure to get that sort of thing done, and so I believe it now more than I think I probably did when I joined, just because of the way that history has borne that thesis out.
Yeah, it was one of those very classic, like, contrarian but right sort of things. In terms of history, you worked at SourceForge. This is, when you joined Palantir, I think you were within 3 or 4 months of actually graduating with your degree, and you decided to drop out a second time. I don't know, walk me through some of that. I mean, it's just a really cool story.
I think I found ambition a little bit later in life than a lot of people do. I spent a lot of my 20s. I went to University of Illinois for a couple of years, and I dropped out in 1997, which was like right in the middle of the dot-com boom. And so I was able to really cut my teeth in the industry purely based on merit, like just showing up and being able to do the job. I had a sort of a nice work history under my belt. But around 2004, I decided that maybe I wanted to open some other doors. And so I looked into what it would take to do certain things. Like, in fact, at the time I was considering academia, maybe going to law school, maybe going to business school. Those were sort of the three things where I was like, if I get a degree, this will open those doors. So, and at the moment, like I wasn't married, I didn't have a lot of commitments. It seemed like the right time to do it. So I went back to school in 2004. I had been in California out in the Bay, and I had to move back to Illinois to continue my classes there. And I had about 4 semesters left to go, and I was 3 semesters in. I randomly met Palantir. I mean, I ended up being the chair of ACM, of the ACM chapter at University of Illinois. And we were holding a job fair, and the guy who was running the job fair came to me, and he was like, can you do me a favor? There's this little company here called Palantir Technologies, and they seem to be working on some interesting stuff, but no one's really talking to them. Can you just go print out a resume and go talk to them just to make them feel better? And I was, sure, why not? Funnily, earlier in that day, I'd already talked to like Morgan Stanley and Google. And because my GPA was not top tier, they didn't even want to talk to me, which I was like, okay, that's fine. I went and talked to the Palantir guys. They were interested. I mean, it was Nathan Gettings, our original CTO, and Carl Freeland, engineer number one at the job fair. They could see that I knew what I was doing, and I had come to the conclusion before the job fair that those 3 avenues that I was thinking about, the law school, academia, and business school, were not actually things that I wanted to do for various reasons. Most of the lawyers I knew didn't really enjoy being lawyers, even though they enjoyed going to law school. Academia was going to require me to stay in Central Illinois and just sort of be out of the loop of sort of global cosmopolitan existence. business school, I knew enough people in business school to know that those were not the people that I really wanted to hang out with for a long period of time. And so it was just like, I don't think that was going to go well. So I had come to the conclusion that what I wanted to do was go work on something sort of big and ambitious and hard. Palantir came along, and that's what it was. And so I came out to interview. The problem was presented to me that was being worked on, and I got to meet the team. I got to meet, Bob and Aki and some of the early people there. And the thing that I found most striking about Palantir in those days is that they were very clear on the problem they were trying to solve. There was this big, hard problem, humble enough to know that they didn't know exactly how to solve it, but also clear on the right way to find our way to that solution was to get a bunch of really smart, motivated people together, give them the problem, and get out of their way. And that was really apparent to me even when I was interviewing. And so that certainly went a long way to piquing my interest. After interviewing, Nathan called me up and, hey, we'd like you to come join our team. I moved across the country to finish school. If you want to wait till June, we'll be here. We'll take you on in June, but we'd like you to come now. Thought about it pretty hard for about a week or two, and I realized what my goal was to get involved in this kind of a project. And if it was right here in front of me, there was no reason to wait. Like, I didn't need that degree to open any doors. And so I, packed up my stuff, and I was back in California by the first of the year. So it was pretty exciting.
Good move. I guess the interesting thing is, campus recruiting was what brought you in. And then even just, I think it was not that long, maybe even like that same year, you and I were on a plane to New York or Seattle, and we were trying to recruit, both on campus and for people who are maybe 2 or 3 years out of college working at the Microsofts of the world. I left to go start a company and sort of enter the Y Combinator world, but you stayed and sort of became the high priest of a sort of, recruiting overall. And particularly, I remember you being amazing at campus recruiting as well. I wonder if there's any sort of masterclass style tips you can convey, because a lot of people watching are trying to spin up their recruiting and trying to spin up their campus recruiting.
Definitely, college recruiting strategy can compound over multiple years. And the thing I think we saw first at Stanford and other places was you go and you identify those really smart people, you bring them on board, they tend to be the TAs. And so the next year, when your TA from the last year shows up to recruit you, clearly you think they know something. You know that they're smart, you know that they're motivated. And if this is the company that they landed at, you just get this sort of compounding effect, and then you can pick up the TAs from this year and the next year, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think I ended up with a really privileged position to observe the dynamics of college recruiting, because I came back to campus having worked, having had a job, and I was like 29 years old. So I think I was much more aware of what was going on, the motivations behind everything that I was seeing than I was when I was younger. And so it sort of felt a little bit, that scene in the Matrix where suddenly like time slows down and he can just avoid the bullets and stuff. I was like, oh, this is really easy. The entire world of the CS students is the CS building. And so even though we were this tiny company that no one had ever heard of, all we had to do was establish a presence inside that building, and we would loom large in the lives of these people. So what was the first step in that? Well, we needed name recognition. And the easiest way to get name recognition was sort of passively. So what we did is we showed up and we made really good t-shirts that we knew that everyone was going to want to wear. And we had our logo on the back. And so what would happen is that every day someone would wake up, they'd grab the Palantir t-shirt and walk around. And so even subconsciously, everybody in that building was walking in a sea of Palantir t-shirts, right? And so it was a name that they knew. So immediately we had a little bit of name recognition. And then the other thing was that there's a grand tradition in the fall, companies coming to campus and giving info sessions. So Amazon would show up, Google would show up, and they give a talk about what it means to work at Amazon, what it means to work at Google. And that's great. A lot of times those talks were kind of boring. They always involved food. In order for us to get people in the door, the little trick there was to find out what the best food was. Now, the best food on a college campus isn't actually always the best food, but it's what people believe is the best food. And that's really the most important thing. So at University of Illinois, it was Papadel's Pizza, which is a pizzeria, deep dish pizza. Everyone loved it. If you got Papadel's, everyone would show up. They didn't care who you were, but they'd show up for the pizza. Cornell, Our good friend Mike Schaefer taught us that it was Dinosaur Junior Barbecue, right? So every campus has a different one. You talk to someone who went there, you find out what the best food is, you order the best food, you put it on the poster. Now you have an audience, right? And so once you have the audience, you've got your shot. And the shot with the info session is about actually putting on a good show. You got to write a good talk. You got to show them the technology. And I think most importantly, you need to really give people an example. You want to be up there and be someone that the college student wants to become. You need to give them an aspiration. So you want to just be cool enough and doing the things that they want to do so that they can say, I want to be like that guy. I want to go and do this thing. And so, and we took a lot of time, I think, on our demos, and we had some really cool technology to show. And so every time I'd go and give a talk, people were blown away. They were only in the room to get the pizza. But once they saw the talk, they were really, really excited. And so every time I would go and give one of those talks, at the end, I'd have like 10 people, which is about a great yield, who were super excited to come give me the resume, shake my hand. And those were the people generally that we were looking for. So that worked out really well. The other trick to campus recruiting, so this is how you do the marketing. So now you've got people that are interested, you've got some people that you can interview. The other trick there is that everything happens on a clock. And this is a thing that you have to learn as an organization, that there is a set calendar to college recruiting, and you need to be inside all the deadlines to do it. Some schools actually enforce this, where they actually have a date, but like you cannot give people an offer that expires before a certain date. Some places it's like November 1st. I think at Stanford it's December because they start later in the year. But that means you have to interview and get all your offers out before December. So you have to move fast. There are some ways to do like sort of on-campus recruiting. The colleges will often make space available for you to do that stuff. But if you need to fly people out and give them the full experience, it's probably worth doing. And just moving as fast as you can. So if you can interview people faster and put an offer in their hands and they're excited about you, they will cancel their other interviews. And so that was actually one of the things that we really focused on in the college pipeline, was moving as fast as we could. As soon as we knew someone was interested, they were on a plane the next week. We'd get the interviews done in one day. They'd have an offer in hand if they were going to get one in the next few days. And that really got us great yields. I think, when I started doing recruiting, we were probably like 20 people. When I stopped, we were about 400 people, and a lot of those came out of college. It was a pretty intense period, and I was working as a coder at the same time.
Yeah, totally. Dual duty, honestly. I mean, that's actually pretty common for some of the best engineers, best product people end up also doing a stint as head of recruiting, head of people. And it makes sense because I was just hanging out with another venture capitalist just before this, and we were just reminiscing about sort of that era of startup. And if you interviewed 10 people at Facebook and LinkedIn and Zynga, three like very different outcomes for the companies, and you interviewed them at one snapshot, say in 2010 or 2012, you probably could have foretold the tail of the tape on one basically died, another one was sold, and then one is Facebook, right? And you would have been able to tell. And I think that that's really, really true. And it sort of starts with the quality of people. And I think Palantir, and hats off to you and the team that you worked with, because there was something very special and still something very special about getting the smartest person from each graduating CS class from the top 5 or 10 CS schools, because it was like a snowball effect. And it started off with not at all having that, not at all having a reputation. It's something that can be built, and sometimes it takes a long time. Today we're talking about it, but the Palantir story playing out today started 17 years ago, which is half a lifetime ago, if you really think about it. I mean, we were kids. I guess we were kids when we were just starting out. Jeez.
It's true. No, I mean, it's a really interesting journey to reflect upon, just because we had the audacity or the hubris to think that we could build something, and it turns out we were right. But along the way, we didn't know how it was going to go, and there were certainly moments of losing the faith to some degree, like not enough for me to leave, but where it was like, I don't know if this is going to work out. Certainly, like around year 3 or 4, when we hadn't quite picked up the customers, we hadn't hit full steam, and we had built some interesting stuff, but it just wasn't quite hitting the way that we hoped it would. It was definitely like, is it time to go? Not sure. And I'm glad that I ultimately ended up sticking it out.
So I guess, I like to end on this, which is, what were things I think, your story, you shared with us such an awesome story, you being, 18 and then 22 and then, sort of late 20s when a lot of the Palantir stuff started happening. What are things that you wish you knew way at the beginning? What would you send in a message in a bottle in terms of like things you learned the hard way or, just sort of as a message to the people watching who are just starting their careers in tech?
Yeah. So I guess there's two messages, and I'll break them down separately. One is there's enough demand in the software world that you can probably find something to work on that you really deeply care about. So finding that job that has meaning is going to really carry you in so many ways. It's gonna bring you a sense of peace in your life that you're like spending your time correctly, and also that like your efforts on this planet are maybe not being wasted. This is some of this perspective maybe you pick up later once you have kids and you're like, wait, what am I doing here exactly? And like, oh my God, what is the shape of the world? Someone should fix that. I guess it's me. So it may be hard to land on in your 20s, but certainly if that's something that you're passionate about, I think finding something that at least lays along the trajectory that you'd like to end up on is possible. And it's probably worth holding out for that if you have the opportunity to do so. The other reflection here is just one of like, everything has an opportunity cost. I spent my 20s working and gaining a lot of experience, but in a lot of ways, I think I was underemployed. Like I was not working super long hours, and I had a lot of time to have a real social life and go out and, when I was living in the Bay, go to Burning Man and like go explore like the rave underground and sort of soak up the way that people do things in other circles. And the thing that I found really interesting when I showed up at Palantir, like I was sort of like a college hire, but I was like 7 or 8 years older than everybody else. And what that meant was in my life, in some ways, I was behind everybody else. I was like, wow, these younger guys like have a real leg up on me in terms of just where they are sort of financially and in their career. Like I'm sort of at the same level that they are now. But because of the path that I took, I actually have a very unique perspective on these problems. And at the moments in engineering that require creativity, I didn't have a party line like most people do who had only been through school. I was able to sort of bring in patterns and architectures from other things and ways to view problems that were unique and novel and ended up being very, very valuable over time. And so ultimately I was aware of the trade-off of that time. So the advice that I would give there is be aware of what you're doing, but know that different paths can lead to the same place. And if you've taken a path that no one else has, you're going to know some secrets that will be valuable in whatever problems you're trying to solve that are in front of you.
Sounds like a Robert Frost poem. Taking the path less traveled,
Yeah, yeah,
there are a lot of dividends.
yeah.
You get a lot. I mean, I remember that. Of the people I remember from that era, you had lived more than a lot of the rest of us, and then it came out in problem solving and the ways to approach design, and really, like, I think it did result in a better solution, a better product overall, and so I see exactly that in terms of meeting lots and lots of founders today, where sometimes people are in such a rush to start a company, but they end up sort of solving the same problem that everyone else with exactly the same background or the same upbringing or the same path to life, infinite competition on that side. The most interesting paths are sometimes the ones where someone figured something out. My favorite one is the founder of Flexport, Ryan Peterson. He moved to China. He learned how to he was at one point one of the world's biggest importers of electric bikes and medical hot tubs. And then later in life, when he was starting to look for ideas for a startup, Flexport became very obvious because he had lived that experience of being in China and understanding global logistics in a way that lots of other people who MBA, like top grades, maybe you don't ever get to see that, right? And so that really resonates with me. So I guess overall, if people want to get in touch with you around your mission with Kairos, you must be hiring as well. What's the best way to get in touch?
We are, maybe I'm old school, but email. I'm beginning to feel like those of us who still use email are sort of dinosaurs. But email is, the probably the right way to do it. And I'm just Ari Ari at KairosAerospace.com, and it's like this Kairos Aerospace.com. Yeah,
Perfect. Dude, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And we'll do it again. I'm so excited to just, yeah, share your story with so many people who, I mean, there's so much to learn from your journey. And so thank you.